Hey buddies, some Spuggy here coming at you in another Borderlands 3 video. Today I want to help you guys build your own builds and build really powerful builds and generally the steps that you need to take in order to make the builds viable for you. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You have no idea how much helps me out. And let's get into it.
Legendary? Whoa! No way, dude!
So first things first, when you're building a build, all you're gonna need is some inspiration and an idea. So an idea of what you want to optimize. So generally with a lot of my builds is I'm trying to optimize one particular weapon. Now a lot of people are very ambitious and want to make the best build possible and make every single thing about the build amazing. And of course that's great. And it's a very ambitious goal to make the best build possible. The best is very subjective and based on people's perspectives, the best could be not considered the best for either their play style or what they're going for. So pretty much what I'm going to recommend for you, if you are planning on making the best build for gun damage. Now there's a lot of generic skill tree setups that you can take to allow you to deal lots of damage with your guns. So if you're looking to just deal lots and lots of gun damage, I'm going to show you some skill trees that you can actually take that are very generic. You can switch and swap depending on what you want to go for. But these generally are excellent skill trees that you can take into the battlefield, just use any gun and deal decent amounts of damage with every single Vault Hunter. So let's go on to that. So I have this website here, Loot Lemon. It's a very great place that you want to use as your encyclopedia for builds or item descriptions and stuff like that. So let's first talk about Flak. Now Flak has a very diverse skill tree. A lot of these things synergize with each other. Now generally every single character has some key points that are very necessary to deal lots and lots of damage in their build. Now with Flak it's going to be Megavore. Megavore is one of the most important things that any Flak build needs to deal lots of damage with gun damage. This makes every single shot have a chance to crit, which is very powerful. Another end capstone, power inside, is very powerful. Generally if you want to deal lots of damage with Flak, want to kind of do a large mix of red and green, you could copy paste this into your Flak build and deal lots of damage. But I could talk more about what is important on this skill tree and every single other skill tree, but this is just a reference point that you can use to get started on your gun damage build. And with Amara, there's a lot of key points that you would need to deal lots and lots of damage and survivability. Now Flak is an interesting case. He doesn't have a built-in health gate system, which essentially means that when you have 50% of HP or more and you hit a certain threshold, you aren't able to take damage from enemies for a little bit. And Flak is the only character that doesn't have an innate ability for health spam, but Amara, Zane, and Moze does, and Amara's is sustainment. There's no reason that you shouldn't get sustainment because this works with all elemental damage that you deal. One of the other more important things on a Amara build is indiscriminate and do harm. Now the reason why do harm is so important is because a lot of damage that Amara is going to be dealing is action skill damage, and indiscriminate does that. This ability does that. Body and mind does that. There's a lot of different things that deals action skill damage. So do harm is always a must that you got to get 5 points in for gun damage. Other key points are Remnant. Remnant orbs can deal tons of damage because of mayhem scaling. There's a lot more you could go into, but let's go on to the next skill tree, Zane. Zane, a lot of times to deal lots and lots of damage, you want to be running fast. So one of the key points is violent momentum. This is the highest and arguably one of the best skills in the entire game, because if you're just at sprinting speed, your damage increases to I think like 500% more or something like that. And with this violent speed, it will then allow you to go even faster, and it's very great. Generic setups are normally like Mantis Cannon and drone or clone, and because of that I'm just giving you both drone delivery and fractal frags. Now if you don't use drones, you can use this point, you put it somewhere else. Don't put more than 1 point in sustainment. Don't don't do that, put it somewhere else. Or if you're not using clone, get rid of fractal frags, put it somewhere else, like maybe that. There's lots of different key points in Zane that is very important besides these two. Like sustainment allows you to get health gate spam, which is very important. You deal millions upon millions of damage in the game, and just 2% lifesteal lets you get all your HP back like that. You only need 1 point into playing dirty because the description of the perk is written incorrectly. We could talk about that more, but it synergizes with seeing red. Every single time you activate your Mantis Cannon, your playing dirty is going to give your next 5 shot guaranteed to shoot an extra shot. Death follows close makes your kill skills better, which makes violent speed even better, which then it makes the most important thing on Zane, violent momentum, be better. Commitment deals lots of damage. Eraser deals lots of damage with certain setups. There's a lot of key points with Zane as well, but once again, I could go more in depth on that another day. And finally, Moze. I'm just gonna go quick because I talk about Moze all the time. You want 5 points in the fire and skag den, short fuse, big surplus because of mayhem scaling. This allows you to add more survivability to your shield, but also get constant boost with desperate measures without getting rid of a 50% threshold, which then gets rid of your health gating. So you never want to put 3 points into thin red line. You want 5 points in Adrenaline Brass, a bunch of other things like special spare, and then rushing offensive, which then gives you also infinite health gating as well. But if you're not looking for gun damage, none of these skill trees are probably going to be the ideal setup for you, because sometimes an idea doesn't require gun damage, like this build I have right here. So this build, as you see right here, I am Flak. This skill tree is extremely different to the other skill trees. Of course, I tell Megavore because Megavore is a very important point, but everything else is very different. I have a bunch of skill tree points in the purple, and my generic skill tree didn't have that at all. That's because we're using fuzzy math to synergize with a certain idea I had, which was to deal lots of damage with our shield. Pretty much what the synergy is I want to messy break up the deal as much damage as possible. Now every single time the shield breaks, it summons a drone. Now fuzzy math, every time the pet crits, we're going to get some of our shield back, but not a lot, so it's able to be destroyed again. So it rapidly destroys and regens the shield, which means a bunch of drones summon really quickly. And we're going to start there. I'm going to try to make a build as strong as possible on screen right now using a similar setup to what I did with the messy breakup, because I'm looking to deal a lot of damage with another shield. Now I'm going to start with the rectifier only because I know rectifier is a very bad shield, but we're going to see if the 50 times pet damage multiplier can make rectifier any good. And if not, we'll move to something else. But we're going to be recording until we find a setup that works really well here. Now to start, I know that personally, I already know a lot of the things with Flak's pet and what makes it strong. But if you're not aware, it's good to use resources online. It's good to use maybe a build that someone else has. Like similar to me, I'm using my messy breakup shield setup, but I probably won't want to do that too much because I want my shield to be depleted, so I don't want any fuzzy math. And whenever I start doing a build, I always start doing researches. And now I could go onto Google and be like pet Flak damage formula, and I could just find Gearbox software. Now Gearbox software has a tons of creative minds that show you the damage formulas for a bunch of different things. So I just want to know how to make Flak's pet deal lots and lots of damage. And right here, this shows me the whole formula. Now you can read this in depth, understand what makes it really powerful. But real quick, we can check right here. The final damage output of the pet is going to be mayhem scaling, which you're already aware, pet damage, which means we want a lot of things in pet damage from our skill tree, Sikkim, Deadeye, which is other skill points that are in the tree. Go for the eyes. Splash. Now splash isn't going to apply to every single thing that we do. Elemental multiplier isn't going to apply to every single thing that we do, but these are nice bases of secondary stats that we can look for when we're trying to deal lots of damage with pet damage. So if you're starting a build, look at resources online like this. This is going to help you tremendously to see what has already been discovered, so you don't have to test something that's already been discovered. There's no point in testing something that is readily available because you're just going to waste your time for other valuable testing that we're going to need to be doing. Like right now, I need to see how much damage the rectifier can do, and how I'm going to set that up is going to be, I know for a fact that I'm going to need the enemies to focus on the pet so they deplete the shield, so the rectifier shield actually does something. So Red Fang makes enemies taunt my pet, so this will then in turn guarantee that my pet will always have his shield down because he's going to be shot at constantly. Now we just figured out that splash and elemental damage can help a lot, but there's nothing in rectifier that does splash. If you look at Loot Lemon, it doesn't say it does any splash damage, so I'm just going to use radiation damage with secondary skill cooldown rate because we know that elemental damage can help, but there's no radiation damage on the rectifier. But that's fine, we're just testing to see if the 50 times multiplier is enough to really do anything, and if it is, we'll try to optimize it even more. Now with grenades, we just looked at everything. It doesn't seem like pet gets any bonuses from any anointments right now, from any grenade anointments that I can think of. And because of that, I'm just going to use a global on throw effect to increase our damage, just in case we want to test that as well. But if you're unsure of what anointment you want to use on a build, there's an excellent resource that you can use. Or even like what guns are good, there's an excellent resource online as well. You want to go to Google, you want to type in legendary spreadsheet Borderlands 3 right there. You click this, and there's going to be a huge list. This is a very overwhelming, I'm sure, for a first-time viewer of something like this. This is very overwhelming, but we're just looking at anointments. This tells you of all the anointments in the game. We can be like, okay, we want to increase pet damage, right? What is going to increase pet damage? I see a bunch of stuff here. So I'm just going to Control F, press pet. There's just one result. There's one result. There's one anointment right here. After using attack command, consume all terror, Flak's pet gains 200% bonus incendiary damage for a short time. That, I believe, spawns on a shield. So that is an anointment that we're going to want to look for. But let's first, before using that, see if the shield rectifier can deal any damage on the pet. Just so I can show you real quick, it has this spreadsheet has a tier list of all the best guns in the game right now. A, B, don't bother, meta. You could still use some of the weapons in the don't bother thing if you optimize your build for a certain gimmick, stuff like that. But if you want to just deal decent damage, just use some meta guns here, or even some A classes. But let's actually focus on what we're doing on our build itself. We know we want our shield to be depleted, so fuzzy math is not going to be something we want. We're going to want to respec. Now, respecking is very important for every single build you want to do. Now, I know I want to get as much pet damage as possible, but I know I want my pet to also have the shield. So I'm just going to real quick put some points into here to make the pet move around faster, increases our pet damage as well. Throat Ripper, the crit could activate on the rectifier. We'll have to test that. And I'm just going to real quick conform the skill tree to take this so we can gain a copy of Flak's shield. And you don't have to worry about making an optimized skill tree because we're really just testing things at this point. So I'm just going to equip a random pet. Now, since the rectifier shield deals damage to nearby enemies, we want a pet that is going to get into melee range. Now we can actually go into the field and start testing. I know there's a lot in between prepping and testing, but you really got to think about what you want to do. My idea is to try to make the rectifier shield deal lots of damage, and my only chance is probably going to be with the Flak pet because of the 50 times mayhem multiplier and a bunch of other pet multipliers. So that's my gimmick. I want to try to make the rectifier as good as possible. So now that we have an idea in head, something that's not gun damage, we can move on to a field to test. Athenas is one of my favorite testing areas, so we're going to go there and see how the shield actually does. And while I'm loading in, all the generic skill trees that I said for gun damage for all the characters are going to be linked in the comments and description below for your viewing purposes in case you want to copy and paste them. Okay, so there's some enemies over there. Now we're going to see a lot of damage coming from the actual pet because of mayhem scaling and gamma burst doing decent amounts of damage, but we're going to try to look for anything that it resembles the rectifier. So let's wait for the shield to go down. Now the rectifier is lacing into those enemies. It didn't seem to deal a lot of damage, and the shield is still depleted, and we're just going to see if the shield is still working as intended. I know certain shields just generally don't work. Now this pet is right close up to that guy. He ran past him, and it doesn't look like the rectifier is actually working anymore. Now that is a problem. It doesn't seem like the rectifier wants to work at all times. So I'm going to unequip it, re-equip it, see if we can't get it to fix itself. So right there, it's doing its thing. It's still doing its thing. That's good. And right there, it stopped. So it seems like the rectifier is bugged on pets. That is good to know. Or even if that's intended, I'm not sure. But it looks like the rectifier doesn't stay constantly procced. So this is a bust. So that doesn't mean you give up. Now, testing a build is all about seeing if it's going to work. Now, we just figured out that rectifier doesn't work. What are some other shields that we can use to see if it works? So I actually prepped for this video and took a bunch of shields that are going to actually be working for the pet. So we know the rectifier doesn't work. What's very similar to the rectifier? It's going to be the rad suit or even the embers blaze. Now, the embers blaze works even if the shield's broken or not. So we're going to equip it and let's see if that's any better. So we see that the blaze, Ember's Blaze, it's dealing damage to these guys. It looks like it's doing ticks of 1 million, it seems like. Let me summon with Gamma Burst real quick. It seems like the Ember's Blaze, when the enemy gets close, or should I say the pet gets close, it deals around 1 million damage with just the Ember's Blaze. That's pretty decent. That's nothing to really scoff at. It's nothing that is spectacular. It's definitely doing something. It's way better than the rectifier. So there, we got something. We know the Ember's Blaze does decent damage. But is that good enough? So next, after you test mobbing, you want to test bossing. Now, why Athenas is such a great place is because not only is there enemies that you can test mobbing is, not only that, there's going to be Captain Tron at the very end, and Captain Tron's a very good dummy to test builds with. So we're going to go over to Captain Tron, see how much damage we can get the Ember's Blaze to deal, or even how fast Captain Tron can die and gauge whether or not this build is good based on how much DPS we deal. You want to always test their DPS with builds. Grave Ward and Captain Tron are two of the best dummies in the game to test builds on. So if you don't think that your build is doing good, you want to know if it is actually doing good or not. Sure, you're dealing great mobbing. You want to see how much damage you can deal raw. Go to these targets, kill them as fast as possible, and just see what your average DPS checks go to. So let's skip over to Captain Tron now. Now that we're Captain Tron and he has a decent health pool for us to test it at, let's summon the pet and see how much damage the Embers Blaze can kill, or even how much damage the Embers Blaze can actually deal. So we're seeing that it's still doing around the 1 million per tick. And Captain Tron, I don't know how much HP he has on offhand right now, but it seems like the pet is doing okay damage. Now, personally, I'm not satisfied with the build unless Grave Ward or Captain Tron can either be killed in 5 seconds or less. So this is a bust for me. I don't think this is a satisfactory answer. So for me, personally, I would say the Embers Blaze doesn't do it for me. So let's test another shield. Now I have this shield, the Shooting Star. Now when depleted, successful melees will summon a projectile. Let's see if this even works with the pet. This is all for the test. I've never tested this before. Let's see if it works. So the pet is meleeing him right about... He's not meleeing him, hold on. There you go, he tried to melee him. He's meleeing him. It doesn't seem like it's spawning. So let's try a different pet to see if it spawns with another type of pet. So Spider Amp doesn't work, and Skag can melee as well. So let's see if the Skag can actually do anything. So I'm going to summon him. He's going to get his shield depleted. He's meleeing him. It doesn't seem he's spawning any projectiles, but he is still doing lots of regular damage because of mayhem scaling. So that seems like a bust. It doesn't actually work. So we now know that this shield doesn't work either. So that's all part of the experimental phase. Let's next try the Impaler. Now, the Impaler, if I take a quick search on Loot Lemon, which is the same site that I used for the skill trees, it says when taking bullet damage, active or depleted shield, it launches a corrosive homing spike. So we know that it doesn't necessarily need to have the shield active, so we don't need to change your skill tree at all. So right here, I'm going to be looking for any corrosive numbers that comes up because we know the Impaler does corrosive damage. Right here, it doesn't look like even spawning, which means that it's possible that for some reason, even when the shield is depleted, it might not be spawning the spikes, or maybe even when the shield is active, it spawns the spikes more. So I'm going to go back to Sanctuary and respec real quick. Now, just because this video is getting pretty long, I'm going to skip some of the testing. So I already tested the Impaler doesn't actually deal decent damage. Neither does the Impaler variant Void Rift. The Void Rift Novas didn't really deal much damage either. So I'm just going to go test now the Faulty Star and see if that's any good at all. If it is, I'll keep in the footage. Now, luckily, we have this Faulty Star that has the anointment after using an attack command. It consumes all terror. Now, because we're using a terror setup, I'm going to use action skill and apply terror on this as well. And then also use a face puncher, just in case we can use this anointment to boost our damage even further if the shield actually does decent damage. For the purpose of this setup, I'm going to use this skill tree, which is very similar to the Messy Breakup skill tree, but I'm going to leave 4 points outside just to put some points into extra fuzzy math just in case, because I know for a fact that whenever the Faulty Star gets damaged when the shield is actually active, it's going to trigger a Nova. So we might need to have more fuzzy math to get the damage effect happening more often. So I'm going to use the same exact pet setup, similar Gamma Burst setup. Now, this skill tree is not optimized and normally get endurance, but we're just doing some testing right now, as I said 1,000 times. So we're going to keep the extra points for fuzzy math here just in case. Another testing map I like to use is the Malawan Takedown. So we're going to fast travel to the Malawan Takedown just so we can get some more extensive tests because there's some beefier targets there as well. I'm pretty much just going to do the same thing. I'm going to summon my pet with Gamma Burst. I'm going to see if there's any massive Novas that happen. So actually, as we're going, if you guys can barely see it, but normally there's a Malawan guy right here, but the Malawan guy exploded with 55 million damage I saw for a few seconds there. So I think the shield did that. So we're going to real quick keep watching to see if the shield is actually dealing that much damage, because that was pretty insane, I gotta admit. So I just confirmed that the shield is doing around 55 million damage per Nova, but we're not getting the Nova to proc very often, and that might be because the shield is being depleted so quickly and it's not getting a decent amount of chance to actually deal damage to the shield. So it's possible that if we put more points in the fuzzy math, we'll get more shield capacity for our pet, like more shield regeneration, and then it's possible to see if we'll get more faulty star procs. So let's see if that helps at all. So I'm going to be summoning him here. I'm going to see if we can't get any more faulty star procs. So there was one actually, so that was really, really good. So I don't know about you, but it looks like we're getting more faulty stars to proc, which is really, really good because that's pretty much what we're wanting to happen. So we're getting a lot more damage to actually happen here, which is really what we want to see. So we got another faulty star to proc right there. There is another. So that was really good. So we're gonna spawn him here again. This actually might be a setup. This is really, really cool. If you look at the bottom left, you'll see that the pet is occasionally getting most of his shields back, which is really, really good. It's just a matter of the chance of whether or not the faulty star is actually going to proc or not. So right there, it procced again right there. So we're getting a lot of more faulty star procs, which is really, really good. Now, right there again, that was huge. I just want to confirm we don't have any success imminence, which means that we're not seeing any novas coming from this. We're seeing all the novas actually come from the faulty star itself, which is really, really exciting because it means that we got something that actually works, which is good because right there, it did it again. That's crazy. Because it wasn't working originally with just one fuzzy math, so it seems like 5 fuzzy math is a tiny bit essential for that, which seems a bit weird because it should just have to require the shield to be damaged, but it's possible because not just one shot can deplete the shield. We're seeing more faulty star procs, so that's really exciting actually. And we have the Terra Anointment to increase our damage as well. That was huge, guys. That was insane. This actually might be like a build itself. I'm really excited that I got this on camera, and this is something we can actually do for maybe like a future video or something. This is actually really, really good. Right there, that killed another enemy. So let's actually go to the Valkyrie squad and see how much damage we can deal, because those are also some nice bosses we can test the actual build on. So I'm just going to summon the pet. I'm going to try to get him to use his attack command, which he did, which means he's dealing 200% more fire damage as well. I'm not seeing any faulty stars proccing here, but I know that these bosses don't constantly hit, unlike the other enemies that we were dealing with, because they're not doing regular bullet attacks. But we'll probably see some procs from here. Right there, it just killed the whole crowd. That was awesome. Okay, so this build right now, sometimes you got to determine whether or not a build is good with bossing or mobbing. It looks like the build can kind of do both, but these bosses don't really attack the pet much enough to deal the faulty shield constantly, but we did get it right there, so that was good. Now, of course, we can also help the pet out and deal some damage. That was another faulty start. So after some testing, it looks like we actually got a setup that works. So it looks like faulty star is going to be basically my next build, so that's very exciting to get on camera and for a video like this, because I essentially just showed why the testing process is so important. Now all that's left is optimizing it. Now we know that the pet has to take damage in order for the faulty star to actually proc. So we know that the red fang will grab aggro for the pet, but because of the fact that the pet doesn't necessarily need to be close to any enemies, we don't actually have to use the skag then, or even the spider ant or any melee pet, and we could probably transform this build into a loader build, because loaders deal the most amount of damage for pets, arguably, especially with grenades and stuff. So at this point, you pretty much just got to test a bunch of other skill tree setups with other augments, anointments, and stuff like that, and see what works. And I'm pretty convinced that the warloader would actually deal the most amount of damage, and definitely optimize it. I'm probably going to want to get endurance, but it seems like the build does lots and lots of damage, and I'm pretty satisfied with the results. So I'm actually going to finish my testing and say that I hope that this video was able to help you a tiny bit. Perhaps this will then encourage you to do your own test, because really, to make a good build in Borderlands, it's all about testing. All of my builds took hours upon hours of testing. Of course, you can use some prior knowledge to see if a build actually works, but take an idea, look to see how you can optimize it with the skill tree, maybe get some inspirations from other creators, look at the damage formula, stuff like that, and go from there, just like I did with this build. If you guys think there's some important step to building that I totally missed, I would love to hear some suggestions in the comments on how I could have probably improved. I want to hear what you guys think is the most important thing when making a build in the comments. maybe you can help a fellow person out, or maybe we can even refine this video further. And finally, I want to thank our members for making this possible. We got 3 members, which is Clairvoyant, Jason Noodles, and Galaxy. Thank you very much for becoming a member. Pretty much what becoming a member does is allows you to support me as little as $5 a month. This will eventually allow me to go to full time to make more videos for you guys. So big shout out to these members for making these videos possible. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him up with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on a wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.